Warzone is another episode that is more fun to analyze than it is to watch. The episode introduces us to Charles Gunn and Company, who we spend most of the story with, and as with any plot that tries to get us to care about a completely new set of characters rather than the ones we've already formed a deep emotional bond with, the results are somewhat on the meh side. As charismatic as J. August Richards is, and he is, Gunn and Company are tropes we've seen 100 times before, and what might have been a solid emotional payoff gets undercut by some dodgy dentals. But on closer examination, I think there might be something very interesting going on with this episode. As with any plot that tries to get us to care about a completely new set of characters rather than the ones we've already formed a deep emotional bond with, the results are somewhat on the meh side. As charismatic as structure, and with Gunn himself.
I get visions.
We do things a certain
We open on a young woman walking a dark alleyway at night, followed by a pack of Silverchair vampires. The lead grunge rock pyre turns, and for a moment we think it's Angel, what with the dark clothing and the first few notes of his theme. But instead we meet Charles Gunn. The woman is Gunn's sister, and the two of them lead a gang who defend the streets from the Midnight Nasties. The vamps in the alley get the best of Gunn's crew, who I'll dub the Lost Boys, and the gang returns to Neverland to attend to their wounded. On the other end of the spectrum, Angel and Company are attending a party of billionaire David Nabbit, who is having some unfortunate blackmail issues, having gone to a demon brothel. Angel... Flawless beginning as ever, eh? Tracy, I don't deserve that donation, but thank you. Thank you. And the buttons aren't working. What am I doing? What is going on? Hi, everybody. Hi. I think you can hear me now? Yes, so we'll finish the episode guide for a minute now. I have no idea why the headset mic stopped working. But none of you are new. You know what to expect from me and my streaming capabilities. The buttons break. The headset mic doesn't work. I don't even know why I'm wearing this anymore. Who cares? So, where were we? Hi, how are you? How was your week? You look so nice. Today we're talking about Warzone. I was going to say a bunch of stuff about things, but I know we have people waiting, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. But for the rest of the season, because we actually were getting to 3 hours per conversation, we're going to drop down to 1 episode per conversation, but the next one will actually be in 2 weeks. Thank you for your patience. I'll talk to you on the other side of the video. Tracks the blackmailer from the brothel to an alleyway. The Lost Boys see him coming and save the blackmailer from Angel. Angel accidentally flees into Neverland and saves Gunn's sister from a booby trap. Enough of a gesture that Gunn lets him go. The vampires from the opening scenes are having a meeting about the Lost Boys and decide to attack. They take Gunn's sister in what is a genuinely harrowing scene. The shots of Alana being murdered through the ugly van window and Charles' expression after really bring the consequences of this life home. It lands in a disturbing fashion. Angel returns to Neverland to try and offer his services.
Unless, of course, death is what you're after, then you're on your own.
I'm always on my own.
Angel gets locked up. Gunn kills his vampire sister. A pretty good emotional beat is interrupted by some enormous lisp-inducing vampire teeth.
Oh, say goodbye to everything you ever knew.
I thought they'd figured out the lispy vampire dialogue problem after Darla died with marbles in her mouth.
There was a time when we shared everything, wasn't there, Angelus?
Apparently not. And the episode ends with Angel and Gunn striking a pact of mutual support. Warzone is a strange episode. The only writing credit went to Gary Campbell, his lone Buffyverse script, whose other resume entries include The Kids in the Hall, The Jamie Kennedy Experiment, and Mad TV. With those sorts of entries, is it odd that... That's a very weird resume for this particular episode, and especially some of the stuff that they were grappling with. Audio looks okay. I think you can hear me now. Now that we've got my first stream out of the way, I'm betting the next ones are going to be a lot better. Warzone feels so dry? It's another very transitional episode away from the episodic film noir vampire detective concept the show started with. Season 1 has been nothing but an experiment as the writers tried to find their voice, but clearly they were leaning towards a more serial-style show going into Season 2, which by necessity would have meant building out the cast. Thematically, David Nabbit is set up in stark contrast to Gunn's world. The opening cuts back and forth between them are intended as direct commentary.
I like to smell a little money once in a while.
Pick me up like I was a baby. It's dust, Bobby. Forget about him.
Gunn's is a violent and transitory world, one with no expectation of long life. It's also much more ethnically diverse. Nabbit is isolated by money and class. The episode is mostly the introduction of Charles Gunn, and there are a few structurally interesting elements to it. Throughout, the Rube Goldbergian style of his gang and their improvised stake cannons and traps kept making me think of Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. Like Peter's Lost Boys, Gunn's gang of misfits have no expectation of ever growing older, and they too have a Wendy who is eventually captured by the pirates, before returning to London to eventually grow old and die. Though Angel's speech at the end,
Who the hell are you? Name's Angelus.
inadvertently relegates Gunn to the role of Rufio rather than Pan.
I'm always on my own.
Whatever racial commentary the episode is making through the Pan analog gets especially interesting when you consider that in the original 1953 version of Peter Pan, the Lost Boys were all white, and some of the movie's portrayals of ethnicity have,
Why does he ask you out?
not a... That song, is burned in my brain. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, I had a little record player, and I had a bunch of Disney records, and I had the Peter Pan record, and you know, I was 6 in 1985, and had that song memorized, and now even sometimes, you can't control when these things come back to you. You know, I'll be standing in the shower, and the lyrics of that song will pop in my head that I'm not gonna sing on stream, but I'm like, oh yeah, not good. Like, I'm not bemoaning the experience. It's just interesting how certain things, even toxic or unhealthy things or racist things or whatever, when you're in certain circumstances, sort of get under those mechanisms, and they're all still sort of there. Because it's a catchy song. Of course it's a catchy song. It's supposed to be a catchy song. But it's just interesting how, if you sort of grow up through eras and those sorts of tropes and stuff like that kind of get stuck in your head. And this is so self-evidently terrible. The song "What Makes the Red Man Red," that I was trying to frame. This is the 1950s, 1960s. I was trying to frame a discussion for the trope or stereotype that Gunn is cut from, where, because maybe we don't have the same sort of distance from it, we can kind of make a comparison to the way this has aged versus some of those other things. But anyway, I hate how catchy that song is. I hate it. Aged particularly well. The vampire gang may also have been designed to be racially evocative. Their leader is white with a shaved head, and their daylight gas mask outfits feel vaguely reminiscent of the Nazi SS. The problem is, the episode doesn't really have anything new to say about ethnicity and economic stratification in the United States, but rather uses those ideas as the backdrop for the introduction of these two characters. And like Hero's goose-stepping racial purity demons, these themes are so top shelf that without any kind of payoff to their use, I found them a distraction from the emotional story that was going on. Nabbit is the less interesting of the two, though his presence does give Cordy a nice moment where she comes to realize how far she's progressed from... That's my favorite moment in the episode. Maybe I could... I think she says, maybe I could prostitute myself out. No? No. Or whatever it is. Her phrasing of it is particularly blunt in a very Cordy kind of way. I think it's very nice. From the beginning of the season, Nabbit represents for Cordelia a simple and straightforward return to the life she thought she was going to have before she left Sunnydale. Though it might have involved a bit of moral compromise to do so, Nabbit is a good-hearted man, and without a doubt, Cordy could have run the show with him.
I like David. It's such a strong, masculine name. It just feels good in your mouth.
Can you imagine episode 1 Cordy turning down the opportunity to gold dig the kind, safe, and inoffensive Nabbit? David and Gunn's presences both feel like waters being tested. Gunn's character offered an outsider's perspective to Angel's world, in contrast to Wesley and Cordelia, devoid of privilege or pretense. Of course, that's all part of the well-known trope his character is from. The impoverished African-American male from an inner city who has resorted to a life outside the law to find some kind of justice, and has no expectations for a long life.
We're dying here, Gunn.
Everybody dies.
But it's of value to distinguish between a trope, a cliché, and a stereotype. Tropes are simply patterns that are familiar to us in media, frequently used plots, characters, or devices that we recognize. What matters is what the story does with them. For instance, Cordelia began Buffy as the bog-standard mean girl trope.
God! What is your childhood trauma?
4 years later, she might be one of the most complex characters in the Buffyverse. I think for that reason, in order to consider Gunn and his arc in the series, it's important not to simply dismiss his early appearances as tone-deaf or cliché. Appreciating an arc means taking both ends of it into account.
I think it would also shortchange J. August Richards' performance, which is wonderful.
But that also means we're going to have to talk about things that never make anyone uncomfortable, things that Gunn unambiguously mentions in this episode.
I don't need advice from some middle-class white dude that's dead.
Race and class. For being so progressive
Never
in
makes
regards
anyone
to
uncomfortable.
issues of gender and sexuality, neither Buffy nor Angel's shows have had much to say on the topic of race, save for Mr. Trick's observation early on.
Sunnydale, admittedly, it's not a haven for the brothers, strictly the Caucasian persuasion here in the Dale.
It's a cute and self-aware observation by the writers that is quickly swept aside and maybe a little overshadowed by his witheringly cringy final line.
I hear once you've tasted a Slayer, you never want to go back.
But in short, to this point, any non-white actor has been relegated to a minor supporting role, and many of those suffer a quick death. Representation across media is important for many reasons.
I'm working on Fool for Love now, which is one of my favorite episodes in the series. And then there's Nikki, who in principle I love, but in her sort of continuing the trend that I was talking about there, it's like, dang it. You want to do that. It's, I don't know. It continues to be a thing in Buffy. Even into season 7, which felt to me like a course correction kind of season for, I feel like that was when self-awareness of some of those misses started to set in, but it's still, it's frustrating. Not simply for the sake of reflecting the world we live in. In their essay, The Individual, the Institutional, and the Unintentional, cited in the description, Mary Iatropoulos and Lowry Woodall suggest that studies show popular culture's centralization of whiteness effectively limits the scope of perception of what exists and what's possible, not just on screen, but in the viewer's mind as well. In other words, a portrayal of a same-sex relationship as healthy and normal in a show also normalizes those kinds of relationships for people who consume that media, and a lack of diversity across media normalizes whiteness and pushes other ethnicities to the status of, well, other. And that phenomena is actually an aspect of Gunn's arc that we'll get into. This will be an unfolding conversation, but I want to say a few things here as framing. First of all, the trope that Gunn's characters cut from feels stale because of its overuse in media, but that also doesn't make it irrelevant. Second, while I'm going to be looking for what's interesting about his arc, because that's kind of what we do here, that is not to say it's never mishandled or free of stereotypes and cliches. Just as some of Buffy's feminism feels dated today, there is plenty to cringe at. But as someone who was the sweet spot age when Friends was airing and laughed while completely oblivious to the potential harm of Chandler's transphobia, I'll just point out that the root of the word progressivism is progress, and progress is by definition measured over time. Also, I know we're a very international audience, and issues of race and class vary from country to country. Our discussion
discussion will specifically be focused on those issues as they pertain to the States and inform Gunn's character. Finally, in case you hadn't realized at this point, I am not a sociologist nor an academic. I do a lot of reading and research with these essays, but mistakes will come. To this point, I have had the grand privilege of not having to wade into these conversations, but they are an aspect of Gunn's journey, and it's a commitment of mine with the guides to do every character justice. But as much as there may have been a few missed opportunities here, Warzone is an adequate and entertaining episode. J. August Richards feels like a fun and charismatic addition to the cast, and it's nice to see that our core has already developed to a point where they can reflect and feel differences within themselves. Still, the wonderful 5x5 gave us a demonstration of what a complex and intricate antagonist could do for the show. Wonder if there's a direction they could go in with that. I'm not mad about that one. Yeah, it's interesting. So I rewatched. I think the way that I would describe what I was trying to say in there about writing certain episodes and the need or sense for due diligence. And that applies to doing every character justice and sort of the shows are ambitious. The shows like with Guys Will Be Guys and reflecting that back to Untouched and so forth, they talk about things that are a challenge to talk about, and you run the risk of when you get something, if you miss, you can get taken down for it. But I think that there is always value in the attempt, I guess. But sometimes certain episodes come up where it's like, I've got to say something about Nikki and her continuation of, she dies in the middle of an orgasm. That entire sequence, because Spike conflates love, violence and all of those things with together, love, violence, and sex. The way that entire sequence is edited, it's sexual in the cuts and the speed and rising to the climactic moment. But the climactic moment is Nikki getting murdered. And, I don't believe that any of these things make the show unwatchable. They just need to be discussed. There needs to be a conversation about it. And then in order to celebrate all the things that it does really super uber well. And Fool for Love does tons of things well. God, I love that episode. But yeah, these kinds of discussions, wading into them publicly, which is just a part of what I do, I was like, you want to do it justice, you want to do it right, and it requires a tremendous amount of, I don't know, I better learn and throw to people who do. So, due diligence. It's a thing. Anyway, before I go over to the group, I just want to say that these people who joined into this discussion today are people who support me over on Patreon. They're the ones who make it possible for me to do this full time. That's a different discussion, of course. And Chinese Slayer too, Boris. Actually, Asian representation on the show is even more of a problem. But but we'll get there. You can go ahead and speak about that if you want to. But lost what I was saying. Oh, yes. The people who join this conversation are people who support me over on Patreon. They're the people that make this possible. They're also not necessarily people who choose to be public speakers or choose to put themselves on the internet or be on YouTube or all of that, but they very generously let me stream this conversation out to you guys so the entire community can be involved. So I just ask that, as much as I love and encourage competing opinions and dialogue and conversation, I think that's one of the joys. I also please ask that you give them all the respect in the world. You can say, my glasses look funny, and, what's with that hairline, weirdo, or whatever.
I'm not offering possibilities, but nothing but respect for these people, please. And anyone, if we see any sort of comments about the people who join these hangouts, that'll be an automatic ban and removal. So thank you. I appreciate it. And give me 1 sec to switch over. Hello. Hold on. I have meeting muted in the wrong screen because I'm good at doing this and things. Just a moment. Mixer. Can you guys hear me? Jack, can you give me a sound check? Jack. I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you? Jack, I want to hear you. Hold on. Boy, I really screwed the pooch on this one. That's a terrible saying. Why is that a saying? That should not be a saying. Focus, Ian. Jack, say something again, please. Jack, I miss your sweet dulcet tones. Yep, and you guys are not in the meeting yet. I am going to drop out and rejoin. I will be right with you. BRB. Sorry, everyone. Just a moment. Now? Hello? Yeah, sorry guys. Why? Microphone, speakers, system default device. I think it's lying to me. Oh! Jack? Jack, it's me. It's my fault. I'm sure this makes for a thrilling stream. Speakers, microphone. When you know you have too many headphones. Jack, say something again.
Hello.
Hi! Hi!
Hey, there we go.
I missed you.
You did it.
Hi.
I missed you too, sweetheart. Hi.
Oh,
All right, I'm gonna mute myself now.
Wait, no, please don't. Don't leave me on stage here by myself. Stand here and keep me safe from while I fix my camera.
Okay, I'm here. I'm here.
And camera? Hello.
Hey.
Wow.
Cool.
This is the worst I've done with the technical stuff in years, and that's saying something. But I'm not going to throw myself under the bus. Hi.
Now, can I mute myself?
Yes, now you can.
Okay.
If you must, Jack. If you must. There we go. Oh, and let me. Sorry, stream. Sorry, everyone. There's something in the water today, and it's tea. This is why I don't drink tea. I understand now. So before we get into the discussion, I just want to let everyone know that this is a fully spoiled conversation where we assume that you have either seen all of Angel and all of Buffy. So if you haven't and you're averse to spoilers, you probably don't want to hang in here. Because I imagine we'll be sort of ranging where up and down and where things go and all of that. And we do have a pretty steady and regular repeat group, but newcomers always welcome. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, Callum, but let me go over and say hi. Hello.
Hello. Hi. How you doing?
Good. Welcome. We're talking Warzone today, and it's an interesting one to join in on right at the end of the season. I sort of have a general idea of where the rest of the people here fall with the show, and favorites and feelings about all of that. But this is the first time meeting you, so glad you're here. Can you tell me a little bit about when you watched Buffy and Angel and how you got into it?
Sure. So I first watched Buffy growing up with my mom. It was something we would watch together on TV. I think it was always on like after The Simpsons or something like that here in England. So we would watch Buffy. I think we started right at the end of season 4. That like one of the first episodes I remember watching was Primeval. So obviously I had no idea what was going on. I was pretty young at the time as well, so seeing Buffy like rip out this guy's heart was pretty crazy. And then immediately followed by Restless. So it's,
wow, is. Now that you mention it, that's one of the most bizarre jumping on points I can imagine for the series.
Yeah. But then so that was me by myself watching those first few episodes, I think. But then, my mum started watching sort of partway through season 5 with me. And it was like a great bonding for the both of us. We both really enjoyed it. Season 5 is still probably my favorite season. Season 3 is kind of up there as well.
Those are, I would argue that those are structurally maybe, two of the most perfect seasons in the entire series. That's debatable, of course, but I could see the 5 as a wonderful hook.
Yeah, definitely. And I had a friend who had actually been watching from, if not from the beginning, at least way earlier than I did. So I would talk to him about it at school, and he would tell me all about there's this vampire called the Master, and there's this mayor who's taking over. So it was all this cool backstory that I had no idea about. So when we got to season 7, I actually really enjoyed all the stuff with the First Evil, because they would take on the form of all these previous bad guys that I'd heard about, and I was like, oh, this is So that was
the reveal of the first when when they sort of run through all the personalities and the multiple people that have been big bads throughout the seasons is really a lot of promise. However you feel the season ends or lands, that moment is a thrilling moment of this is the final run and here we go. So yeah. And what about Angel?
So Angel didn't come until way later. I think it did air in Britain, but it was on some channel I definitely didn't have. So that's
interesting. How many years later?
So quite a few, because I was still in primary school when I first watched Buffy. And so it wasn't until I was like about 15, so maybe like 5 years later or something, I was sort of watching, I was acquiring through the internet Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel sort of in their totality, so I could watch them from the beginning, and I sort of, so that was how I would watch them on very low quality streams online.
And when you watched Angel, did you watch it all in a row, or did you hot swap? And sort of where do you fall with Angel versus Buffy? I mean, Buffy obviously has nostalgia for you then, coming at the time in your life that it did.
And it's weird. I think from a nostalgia point of view, it's hard for me to sort of separate Buffy from that sort of context I have. But Angel, in some ways, I feel is a better show than Buffy in a lot of ways.
Interesting.
Like some of the I don't know. It's real difficult. I mean, it's like, picking your favorite children.
I mean, anytime they're like, that's why Sarah actually called me on making comparisons between seasons the last time it came up. It's sort of like, I think they're, sort of favorites, but sort of weighing them against each other is, yeah, picking your favorite kid. They both do
Yeah.
amazing things. Some of the drama and tragedy of season 5 of Angel, I I think it's a height, but I don't know. And then who cares? Because season 6 of Buffy makes me feel all the feelings, so
Yeah,
yeah, you go
exactly.
back and forth.
And different seasons sort of mean different things to me, like when I revisit them, right? So like season 6, I think when I sort of did that first rewatch as a teenager, sort of downloaded from the internet, I kind of thought, oh, this is really dark and kind of depressing. And then as I've gotten older and, had gone through some stuff, I'm sort of like, wow, this is so interesting. And
This is
so,
me.
yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, growing up,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
you know what I mean.
I think so many kinds of media fall into that, hearing songs about drinking and drug use when you're a teenager, like, this is weird. I'm going to go back to, for me, it was Backstreet Boys and, what was I? Oh, who cares, Ian? But then you get older and you're kind of like, oh, okay. It speaks to you and things speak to you in a different way over time. I think that's with the channel and the writing and stuff like that. That's something I'm trying to kind of distill is that experience over time. So,
Mhm.
well, so that gives me some background. I appreciate it. I don't know if you've been privy to the discussions we've done on season 4 and 1, but we just did Primeval last time, which I think does a pretty solid job of bringing together a season that had lots and lots of issues with that. But Warzone's kind of unusual, right? The introduction of a major new character right at the end of season 1.
Yeah, and sort of in retrospect, you do, and you sort of bring it up in the review. It's sort of you can kind of see it as them trying to get their ducks in a row for season 2, right? It's sort of but at the time, I imagine it sort of did feel a bit strange, or maybe they just thought this was like, the new main character for one episode and would never return, but obviously he did.
Well, and the way Gunn is introduced, he's introduced in a way that is intended to say that he is as powerful or equal to Angel,
Mhm.
which is a hell of a statement.
Yes.
The question of whether or not that statement survives to the end of the episode is a matter for discussion, certainly. But it's a powerful introduction.
It is, and you can see it because the vampires actually fear Gunn and
Yeah.
his gang, right? They're a group of humans, but the vampires fear them. That's not something that you actually see too often. I guess because Angel and Buffy are our perspective characters, but yeah, it's interesting to me.
Yeah, organized. So where does the what are your feelings about Gunn? Where does the episode kind of fall?
I mean, Gunn J. August Rich is obviously so charismatic, so
Yes.
fun to watch at any time. He's so fun. He's a really interesting character who is, I think, underwritten at times. I think he, in some ways, didn't reach the potential that he could have because, I don't know, for myriad reasons, I'm sure.
I think underwritten is a good choice of words. I mean, it's purely subjective, of course. I love his character, but I feel like J. August does more with it than the writing does a lot of times.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. Yeah. And there's definitely, like, especially on my more recent rewatches, I sort of think of some of the more quote unquote problematic aspects of his portrayal and
Yeah.
of the directions they take his character.
One kind of dangerous trap I didn't want to walk into was in purely indicting the trope that he's cut from as a cliche.
Sure.
Because I think that I think what that would do would be it would say that there aren't necessarily stories of value to be told from that perspective or about that life or about that character. The issue is not that. The issue is that when the large bulk total of stories that are being told are all that character and not, a lawyer or a superhero or any of that was really kind of the problem. But again, it's a challenging conversation to handle delicately, right?
Yes, yeah, and I think they did some interesting things with it. What's it called? That Old Gang of Mine is a really interesting episode. I think sort of it has its issues, definitely.
I mean, it just his arc in general is a strange one almost about representation. I mean, in a weird way, the line of his character and sort of where he comes from and all of that. It's something to break down and have a conversation about with at some point. But Gunn is such an interesting case, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, he's just such a pleasure to watch that sort of, at least I sort of get wrapped up in it and kind of forget about more complicated stuff.
I hear strange noises when he smiles. Birds singing in the meadow when that man flashes a grin. It's a wonderful thing. So the rest of the episode is David Nabbit. You know what's odd? We talk about underwriting for Gunn.
Yeah.
David Nabbit, if we're giving equal shrift to everyone, of course, David Nabbit doesn't have issues of representation in our culture wide, but man, is he a boring, underwritten character.
Yeah, I think, I don't know the name of the actor, but whoever portrays him,
I love that. Yeah, I love that actor. It's just so funny that I think they're sort of introduced to be sort of thematic foils for each other. Yeah. And they're both sort of equally meh in comparison. But again, and I enjoy both actors quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they bring him back later on to sort of do the finance and sort of get them to own the hotel without paying for it and all that, was a really fun scene.
He's a delight. I mean, it's just it just kind of never goes anywhere.
It's sort of they have that sort of one fun idea, and then it's like, I mean, I don't know, maybe he wasn't really needed to come back, I suppose. There's not much to him. You could argue that you could have done something more interesting with him.
We have to wonder if he was intended to be a tool of the episodic structure.
Yeah.
So to have an infinite MacGuffin to fund the Angel Adventures, he could be kind of an effective storytelling tool. But beyond that, you want your characters to be playing off each other and evolving with each other. And he was always going to be separate unless he moved into the hotel. Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, and you could contrive a way for that to happen. I'm sure he sort of shows a sort of an interest in their sort of investigations and adventure and all that. So there's a way that could have happened, but whether that would have actually been good for the show is a different question.
Yeah, highs and the lows, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I do want to just someone on the Discord, I think it was Heather, sort of mentioned this idea of shipping David with Anne from the shelter together, and I thought that was such a sort of wacky pairing. But I really like that idea actually. Now that I've seen it,
that's one I've never thought of before.
Well, yeah, it's not one I would have thought of independently, certainly, but. Another kind of character that probably deserved to be on screen a bit more, I suppose.
Yeah, and definitely. What's her name in Lie to Me? Chanterelle.
Yes.
All right, but is there anything else you want to throw out about Warzone?
Warzone. I guess one thing that sort of I find interesting is that at the time, so what year did this episode air? Is it 2000?
I don't have it in front of me. 2000.
2000. So at the time, one of the sort of really big sort of representations of vampires in media was the Blade franchise, right? I think the first Blade film came out in like 98 or something like that. So around that time. And I think when I went back to rewatch Angel, I kind of expected them to be like cribbing from Blade in some ways, sort of with Gunn's gang. And they didn't at all. Actually, there's nothing in common between them. So
no, I honestly think what it is the writers are comfortable in a certain bowl, and things work best when all the characters are swimming in that same bowl. But when they have to sort of interact with, when they're fueled or by, I think you see that with Cordelia. Cordelia in Buffy season 1 is your standard kind of mean girl trope, but she evolves in proximity to the main characters. And then if she's in the bowl, she grows and is interesting and a lot of fun. And if she's outside the bowl, she's purely a straightforward antagonist. Like, you're the Zeppo. Look it up. And it isn't until she sort of, she and Xander kind of rectify things that she kind of comes back in. And I think that kind of happened with Gunn a little bit. Whatever could have been done with the gang, the Lost Boys, or any of that, ended up getting lost because I just feel like that's every writer's room has a comfort zone, and to me their comfort is sort of those characters interacting and playing off each other. That's just my theory, though. I don't know.
Yeah, it was just something I thought was kind of interesting in terms of parallels, and that in terms of sort of black representation in sort of science fiction at that sort of time was sort of pretty sparse, and that was kind of the one example you had sort of relating to vampires specifically, and at that time, and
well, especially given Joss's comic book background, you would
exactly
I could see them doing that. Yeah.
So and you know it not, and I'm not saying it would have been better if they had done or anything like that. Probably would have been easiest thing in the world for them to do, because in some ways, I guess you could probably relate Blade more to Angel than anyone else, right?
Yeah.
It's the sort of,
yeah,
they already daywalker vampire who has the cool leather jacket and all that.
Yeah, Angel's already doing kind of a Batman motif anyway.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm trying to picture Gunn saying, "Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill now."
Yes, that is one of the great movie lines.
That Wesley Snipes improv. I love that line.
I know. Yeah. Well, some of the stories of Wesley Snipes on set for that film are pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. All right, man. Well, I need to move on, but I just want to say thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I hope to see you in 2 weeks. Thank you
for being so welcoming. It's great.
All right, bud. Sarah.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi. I was just gonna say, Callum, it's nice to put a name to or a face to the name, because we've met in the Discord, I believe. Hey, Steve,
hi.
how's it going? Other than chaos of technology?
My brain was apparently broken when this stream started, and I have theories, but it doesn't matter because weird and mute and not very worky.
Yeah, my brain's been on fire, tree pretty today. And didn't sleep. But anyway, to discuss the episode with a bunch of not black people, this is a
it's. I mean, one of the in terms of representation, one of the pervasive issues of the Buffyverse is the overwhelming whiteness of it, and
we're not all white here, but
no.
We're not black, which we can't really speak to these issues specifically.
Yeah. So, sort of doing it justice is a challenge, regardless.
But I would recommend the book Joss Whedon and Race. And
Yes.
there's an article, there's an essay in it by, I do not know how to pronounce this person's name or their gender, Rajan Salisbury, called "The Inevitable Tragedy: The Troubled Life of Charles Gunn as an Allegory for General Strain Theory."
I believe I referenced that in First Impressions. I don't think I did that in Warzone, but the essay I did reference is from that book. But I appreciate you pointing it out.
Yeah, so that if we want to ultimately we want to hear people's own thoughts. So
Yeah.
So I think I'd recommend that on that score because I really found it a fascinating read. Of course, the main problem is that he's the only Black person really that we see. So even if his story isn't a cliche, it becomes the only, it becomes the absence of anything else. But I do really enjoy a lot of Gunn's story, and there's so much potential and stuff that they don't really build on that is in here. I think maybe they didn't have the experience to write the stories that maybe needed to be told, because I find it fascinating him as sort of like this the way he's courting danger and everything. Like the thing that I noticed most on this watch is the parallels with Faith.
Interesting.
If Faith had had a little sister, she might have basically been Gunn. The particular thing I was noticing was the story about the second floor that falls through is so much like the story of Faith jumping off that rock. Where she talks about jumping into the.
Yeah.
I know you have that favorite goldfish.
Well, no. I remember that story from. I don't remember the story of the second floor falling through. But I remember the Faith one very well because of her jumping off the thing at the end of the episode.
Yeah, Alana tells, or I'm not sure it's Alana, isn't it? Talks about how they lived in a shelter that had a rotted out second floor that kids used to walk on, and he could always walk on it. And she tried, and she fell through, and he caught her.
Yeah.
And so it reminds me they're kind of like between them they are Faith, but Faith is who she is because she didn't have somebody else, and so this is sort of like another path for that deprived child.
Yeah, it's interesting the way they line up, actually, because Gunn and Alana had each other, and Faith was driven by a desire Gunn and Alana could carry each other, and one of Faith's defining characteristics is a desire to connect and to carry and be carried by someone else in those, and sort of looking for that from Buffy, and it kind of not being there and driving her to the mayor. So I love those parallels. That's great.
Yeah, and I think he and Faith, they both, I think because of the danger and the instability of their background, they have the courting danger thing, courting death. But also, I was also struck with the parallel between young Angel, or really Liam, and Gunn, because one thing I looked it up, and Alana means precious. So it basically means the same as Darla. They both come from similar things.
Yeah.
So I think both Angel and Gunn had that moment where someone was offering them an escape from their life. And
I see the parallel, and I definitely missed that in the video, which is too bad because that's
this is the first time I saw it.
Yeah, that's a lovely connection. He turns down what Liam didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he knew what he was turning down, and Liam didn't know what he was accepting.
Right.
But
Right. Yeah.
I think there is a sense that to Angel, Gunn is kind of a mirror. it's a little bit of a shortfall of the season of the show, I think, that so many of the characters become mirrors for Angel instead of characters themselves.
Yeah, or it kind of working the other way. My favorite, as you said, there's lots of. I think I say in the early bit of the episode guide that the writers of their own admission didn't know how to write Angel, and so there were a lot of their first attempts were deconstructions of the big broody forehead hero. And I think that them exploring Angel's character through other characters was one of the ways that worked. But a lot of times it didn't go the other direction. But one of the ones that I can think of that it did, and it does so elegantly, and I love it, is Judy. Yeah,
you and I can talk about that one forever.
Yeah, that's my go-to of the reflection paying off for the both of them. Him giving Judy something that he can't have, and a lot of times it's sort of Angel understanding something through the people around him. So yeah, it would have been nice to see some reverse progress on Gunn's story with his community and his group versus Gunn just sort of being sucked into Angel investigations and them dropping all of that.
Yeah. It just would have been great to see something other than the love triangles. I do like him and Fred. I like the potential there, although again, it's not explored. There are great moments, but there isn't space for it. And you got the triangle with Wes in there, and it just ends up flattening the character and flattening the story. And recently I was also wondering, after J. August Richards came out, it could have been fascinating if we'd had a gay Gunn.
Yeah.
Or a bi Gunn.
Yeah.
Well,
and just the way he's in the first season, he's very conventionally masculine. Him being the muscle and all of that, and there were just exploring sexuality and masculinity together could have been interesting.
Wouldn't it have been awesome if he was that guy and he was still gay?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Like those people exist. They do. He could have been rough trade. It would have been very popular.
Yeah. There's some question of whether or not I hate Fred. I don't hate Fred. I'm not sure how that rumor's getting started, but we'll stop that now. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I personally love Fred, but I don't always like the way she's written.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that we can say that about a lot of the characters.
Yes.
But yeah. Were there other things I had to say?
I mean, and again, in a weird way, it's interesting that when we have discussions about Buffy and Angel, they take on a different kind of tenor, don't they, than when you have a conversation about, I mean, as an example, Friends, which has some abhorrent aspects to it and the way it's told and all of that. But the weird part about it is, and I just don't want to lose this in the flow of the conversation, is that I think part of the reason we have the conversations about the stuff that we do about the show is because of the ambition. Because when it says something well and it says something meaningful, it speaks to our souls. Which is why when it's a miss, it creates a kind of conversation that I worry overshadows the reason we're having these conversations to begin with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's sort of I'm sort of aware of what could have been in a way that I am not with Friends.
Yeah.
There is no could have been.
Exactly. Friends wasn't shooting for the things that Buffy and Angel shoot for thematically or dramatically or any of that stuff. So yeah. Sorry, I stole your thunder.
No, it's okay. My brain is all ADHD today. Yeah, the other I don't quite know what to make of Cordelia's bit with David Nabbit.
Oh, her wondering if she can sleep with him for money.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's growth in that her recognizing that as a kind of sex work. Although again, that is that's aged poorly too, because we don't want to be down on sex workers.
Yeah.
But it's also like I personally I think Nabbit is really sweet and cute, and I think there's a lot of um attractiveness privilege or something there in her being like, yeah, I can just have him. I mean, obviously he's sort of a bit, but had they had a conversation, it might have turned out he had no interest in her.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the Wesley Cordy moment, you know,
Yeah.
is an example of that kind of thing. My reading of that scene is I think she uses the word prostitute herself to him.
She does.
Yeah, and I think that uh, uh, Wes says, "Could you really do that?" And I think that the way I've interpreted that scene personally, and maybe I've gotten this wrong, is it's not the sex work, it's the lie. In order to do it, it would be misrepresenting that she was actually interested in him for the money. Not it's not prostitution or that itself. It's just the lie that would be implicit to the relationship.
Yeah, and her recognizing that the lie would be wrong is a step forward in her character, and I like that. I find that whole thing kind of odd.
Well, especially because Cordy is she's interested in class from the that's always sort of a demonstrate. Even I am done with senior boys. It's college students all the way. She says in not Bad Eggs, but Giant Reptile Penis Monster.
Yes, that one.
Yes, that one. And then sort of gives up on that. But she's always shown to be sort of alpha and eccentric and incredibly intelligent and funny and incisive and insightful, not gold diggy. That was kind of a new aspect of her character. I felt like.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know. It's one of those I don't know what to make of it, and I don't know what they're saying there, because it's like, why are you shaming your audience for one thing? We are David Nabbit.
Yeah. Yeah. When he comes in the sword and the cape, it's like, yeah, done that.
So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think he's sweet. And they could have done. I don't know. They could have done something with him. But I don't know. I think that it just seems kind of odd to, put someone who very much represents your audience in there as a joke on how. I don't know.
Well, originally, my first time through season 6, I felt that way about the trio. That the trio were that my initial first blush take of the trio was, these are a lot of obvious Star Wars and action figure jokes and all of that. Like, my line is always like, is the joke a nerdy joke or is the joke haha nerd?
Yeah.
And a nerdy joke I love.
There's Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that once I feel like I have an understanding of what they were trying to do now with the trio, but initially my first time through, I had the same feeling about the trio that you did, which is before they got a few episodes in, they were painting them as lovable losers because they're nerds, and I was like, but that's what.
And I think that that works with the trio specifically because I think they're doing a thing, and I think that
they're doing a thing.
Also, because it ended up being more of a thing than even they thought they were doing. I just don't know what they're doing with David Nabbit.
Yeah, the only reason I brought that up was because eventually the intent of the trio revealed itself, and who knows with David Nabbit if there was going to be some attempt to do a similar kind of thing or make a statement using that. They start with stereotypes and tropes all the time. Willow and Buffy and everyone on in the first season are all characters we've seen many times, but it's just that starting point. But because David just went 2 episodes and stopped, it's like, well, wonder what could have been.
It could have been fascinating if actually he became a thing and Cordelia fell in love with him.
That would have been very interesting. Yeah.
It wouldn't have fit in the show, but it could have been an interesting place to go.
Yeah, you've got a different season 5 for sure at that point, but that would have been really interesting. Or he leaves her all his money when he goes out hunting with Angel one day, or something. Like, who knows? There's tons and tons of interesting ways it could have gone.
Yeah. Anyway, or she could have been with. They could have shipped. I mean, you could also ship Gunn with anybody. Not with David Natter. I think with Cordelia, there's a chemistry there.
But, yeah, they always had. You're still saving my life. You're alive, aren't you? They always had such the. They're both kind of the wordsmiths of the group. The ones for which words are the weapon.
Relationship with them too.
Yeah.
So I just the thing I get frustrated with Angel is that everything always has to center Angel, and it means that the other characters don't get the room to breathe that they need. Apart from Wes.
Wes's arc is spectacular, and yeah, I agree with you.
Like and as to why that bothers me with Angel and not with Buffy, because they do feel more real. Like I do feel like her friends have room to breathe.
You're talking about in Buffy,
and maybe. Yeah, Boris was asking how can I say that, and when I saw it pop up, how can I say that without Angel and not Buffy? I think maybe it's the difference between the reflection thing and the pieces thing, like the big pieces.
Where they're a metaphor versus.
So they're still alive. There's still something when she's not there, but when you're doing a reflection thing instead, it's more 2-dimensional.
Yeah, I get that.
Put that into words. Anyway, I should probably let other people talk.
No, I just want to let everyone know that Sarah is one of our mods on the Discord and regular here, and I'm vamping for time, and I'm doing it terribly with not enough words. She has a channel called The Costume Nerd.
The Costume Codex.
The Costume Codex. Oh, I thought you changed it. I apologize. The Costume Codex, and just finished.
Apparently, I wanted to change it and it wouldn't let me.
Oh, got it. And just finished a video on Star Trek and 7 of 9 that I have put in the chat and wanted to share with you.
Okay.
All right. Well, let me go over to Wonder. Wonder, hello.
Hi there.
Hi. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am better now that nothing's broken and everyone can hear me and the video works.
Yeah.
I should stop focusing on my foibles. I'm great. We are talking Warzone.
Yes. I would love to have seen or maybe like a parody or something when it's feet first, gun, introduction, and then it just cuts to Andrew. Can't I just walk around looking cool in my coat?
You mean, Andrew from Buffy?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Sort of what he does with Spike.
Yeah. I just thought that was funny because can't I just keep walking around looking in my coat?
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I was going to say something kind of similar when you were talking to Callum about how he was introduced and what that says about his character and the sort of differences, because that kind of immediate power position of he's on a level of Angel, it's not really shown throughout the most of the rest of the episode.
No, it's not.
And so it's a contrast between him and David Nabbit. David Nabbit, I mean, yes, he worked for his money, but he has all this money, but he's very socially isolated. But he does get a lot of respect in the position that he's in. Whereas Gunn, he's very socially, like, he's got lots of people around him.
He's got a strong community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A strong community, but he's always, I feel like he was second guessed a lot in the episode, and people kind of talking to him like, oh, what about this? Or, like, oh, well, no, he could have, Angel could have killed me, and he didn't. And I think that kind of actually pushes him more towards not trusting Angel, to have these people come to him and kind of second guess his decision making. Because when Angel saves Alana, you see something in Gunn's reaction. This is not at all what he was expecting.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, and then it carries over where it's just like he's not feeling like he's getting the respect. And so every time Angel comes around, he's really kind of trying to take that power. You're not gonna, you come here, don't count on any long goodbyes. You come here again, like, just kind of really amping that up. And I think that Angel keeps subverting his expectations. And then at the end, which I think is the biggest reason why Gunn is willing to work with him in the future, is that he comes in and he says, I don't want any advice. I don't need I don't need you telling me what to do. And he's just like, well, what could I say? What could I say that you don't already know? And it's just like, what, you're not even going to talk at me? And he says, I don't need any help.
Yeah.
And
Angel says, I might need yours, which I love.
Yeah, it flips that power dynamic over. He thinks that he's being looked at as somebody in this lower status, and Angel just completely flips that on its head. I think it really leaves Gunn pondering and feeling like suddenly, like, he is given that respect.
At least in that moment, for sure. I'll go over. Josh, I see that you have some things you want to add, but I think that there's the meat and potatoes of the plot of the episode. And then there are sort of the broader themes that are introduced by way of the parallel between David Nabbit and Gunn. So the sort of wider cultural and social plight of people at opposite ends of the class spectrum. Sorry, Josh. That I'm not sure that moment addresses. I agree with you. I think it's a great moment. That sort of doesn't take away anything from Gunn, and it puts Angel in a position of asking for something, which is, I think, very nice. But I'm not sure that the episode addresses the reasons why Nabbit was there, which was sort of as a foil for the rest of those things. But I love what was you drew a connection that I missed about Nabbit's social isolation at the top versus Gunn having community and connection, which I think is interesting. I didn't see that, but again, they are inversions of each other for sure, and that's a good read.
Yeah, I just I'm very, I don't know, empathize with David Nabbit, where he's just like, actually going so far as to pay people to be around him and giving extra money just because they sat there. They were talking business,
Yeah.
but it's just that he saw it as, oh no, you talk to me. You talk to me. You know, I'll spend money if people will talk to me.
He's so lonely. Yeah, that could have been a parallel that he might have been intended to be for Angel. And maybe his energy duplicates a little bit of dopey Wesley that they felt they already had. I'm not sure. It's interesting. I'd love to find out what the original intentions were for Nabbit versus where he kind of ended up.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, he's got all this money and no, you know, kind of people surrounding him, but Gunn's got all these people not only surrounding him but depending on him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have, you know, the means to really protect him, which is why he paid such a high price for that truck.
It's interesting how that would have worked in season 2, which is more about Angel either needing the people around him to sort of reflect the best version of himself versus striking out on his own and doing bad in order to win against evil. And how that could have been reflected in that structure between Gunn and Nabbit. Nabbit being isolated and Gunn having a community. And the way that you could have sort of foreshadowed and dealt with that. It's too bad. There's a lot of potential there. And again, potential is one of those words that is never going to be usable for me again because of the 2 shows. But I digress. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. But yeah, I love those 2 things. I think the beginning and the end really plays off each other. We have that entrance, but then you don't really see kind of the backing throughout the episode of him being on the same level as Angel. And during it, Angel is like kind of taken off guard and he's not really sure, but when he sees what's going on and he sees how like Gunn handles himself, he does give him that kind of level at the end.
He gives him close to a similar amount of respect. It is too bad that, I don't know, we'll talk about Gunn's character over the long run. He's got wonderful moments, and I have very mixed feelings as he runs down the alley and not fade away, bleeding to death, as to what happened to his arc and where it ended up and what that says. It is extremely interesting and troublesome and complicated. But it's a wonderful introduction.
Yeah, I also like be interested to know why vampires are not allowed at Madame Dorian's.
Yeah.
I mean, is it human only? Because they specifically said, no, we don't service vampires, not we don't service any demons. So curious, like.
Well, yeah, no, you've got demon prostitutes there, so it did seem to me like a vampire specifically. But if Wesley says in Guys Will Be Guys, and I deliberately decided to remove this from the episode guide, Lorne reads the souls of demons, Wesley says, during the episode guide. And I was like, nope, we're not going there. I am not throwing more fuel for the fire on the soul conversation. But in the context...
Keep getting all screwed up.
Yeah, in the context of, if we're headcanoning demons and why vampires might not be allowed at Audrey's? Did I get that? Dorian. I don't know. Words, hard, head, ADD. It might make sense if they're sort of the bottom dwellers of the demon community, where you get demons like Whistler. A demon. I mean, I'm not a bad guy, who are sort of capable of good, or, demon is not necessarily monstrous in and of itself. Would have been interesting. But yeah, The idea of a demon prostitutes anyway is sort of an interesting thing that they don't bring back. Angel does its best world building to me in season 5. Once they're in Wolfram and Hart, and you have sort of Angel in the Chocolate Factory kind of feel to everything they can do there. But the rest of the time, the world building seems almost purely in service of where can we bring these characters and their sort of themes and backstories.
Yeah, I think also just this episode is situated in a difficult place to be a very good episode. It's right after the Faith storyline, right before the ending. I think that kind of those kind of like in front of it and behind it, it would be kind of hard to really match what's around it.
Well, it's funny. I kind of thought this was a David Greenwalt episode. And I'm always surprised when I look up the writer and see that it's a writer that, this is the only episode he wrote for the Buffyverse. And, the way I've heard, like, I mispronounced her name before, but I don't remember the proper pronunciation. Mare Smith. I heard her talk on the commentary about the way scripts went back to Joss as the showrunner for Buffy, and he would say, fix this, fix this, fix this, and it would go back 3 times, and on the 4th time, he would just rewrite the scenes that he wanted to make them a certain way. And I wonder, given that this person only wrote 1 episode for the series, if David, as the primary showrunner at this point, did a lot of rewriting on this episode. But it's a very unusual episode to give a writer whose main background is comedy. Just very strange.
Yep.
All right, good deal. Anything else you want to throw out about Warzone?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
All righty. Let me go over to Mr. Boris.
Hello.
Hello. And welcome to the Patreon Hangout. Oh, and your video froze.
Oh, is it unfrozen?
Nope.
1. Is it unfrozen?
No, your video's frozen, but I can hear you just fine. We can still chat.
Or there like a me problem or an else person problem?
Would you? Yeah. Why don't you try and rejoin, and I'll go over to. All right, Josh.
Hello.
It could be me because now, Josh, your video froze. I wouldn't be surprised if it's me. But Josh, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
I can. Tell me about Warzone. I heard a hint of what you wanted to share, and sorry, go ahead.
Do you want to bounce back over to Boris, or do you want me to go?
Oh no, you go ahead. We'll go to Boris after.
I enjoy Warzone. I also enjoy Gunn. Like I really like his character, and I really like him on the show and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a fan of the Fred triangle, and I also find his legal brain dump in season 5 problematic as hell.
Good Lord, yes. The essay that Sarah mentioned in Joss Whedon and Race, or the Race, I can't remember the actual title of it, but it's a wonderful breakdown of that arc and why it's fascinating and troublesome.
Yep. And it also kind of undercuts the fact that, especially in throughout seasons 2 and 3, Gunn is clever as hell.
Yep.
Like he because he's the one who, when Kate is like, he broke into the house and murdered the whole thing and captured, Darnetta or whatever she was calling herself. And Gunn is like, he's still a vampire. How did he get in? And Kate's like, bleh, so like, he's clever. He sees the details. He's smart.
Yeah, it's almost like if they had taken Cordelia's character where she what? I'm not allowed to have layers? Where
Right.
she did real well and got into a bunch of colleges, including my alma mater. And then by season 3 or 4, they were like, nope, she's just a mean girl. As opposed to the layers that they kind of built up over the course of time.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like it was impossible for me to consider this episode without considering, the current context here in the United States, where we're trying to decide whether or not Black Lives Matter, and it's in the middle of a global pandemic that half of us kind of care about, apparently.
Well, in our country, but yes.
Yes.
We have
Yeah,
Canadians and Aussies and a whole bunch of...
we're doing great.
Yeah.
And I live in Texas. So what I approached this episode with today was a question of whether or not Angel is a white savior or if Angel is an ally in this episode.
Can you explain what a white savior is?
Sure. So a white savior, as a trope in media, is a character who enters into a new world and attempts to lift up or solve a problem for characters who belong to a minority, usually an ethnic minority. And then by the end of the episode, it's billed as like this triumphant moment with swelling music. Think Green Book or Freedom Riders.
Fern Gully. Wait, no.
Fern, yeah. But yeah, and so I was wondering, especially given how problematic with race the Buffyverse writers tend to be, I was wondering how'd they do. And I rewatched the episode today, and I took some notes and I did some research, and whoever the heck Gary Campbell is, he did all right, in my opinion. Angel begins the episode as a white savior, but ends the episode as an ally.
Okay. Interesting.
And I characterize it by, I've got a tabletop of sticky notes here. I characterize it that a white savior would swoop in to solve short-term problems within the existing system, whereas an ally would attempt to resolve systemic issues and would stand shoulder to shoulder with a minority. And an ally is also aware of and actively wields their power and privilege to aid in that systemic restoration, whereas a white savior centers themselves in the narrative. So the opening, yeah. So the opening foreshadows where Angel ends up by basically making this the Gun Show, guest starring Angel Investigations.
So the precedent for this, and where I felt like Jack and I were having a conversation about this earlier, and where I felt like they kind of misstepped were the early season episodes where they were kind of going for more traditional Buffy, feminist woman takes on and destroys her abuser types of stories, where they didn't know what the hell to do with Angel during the episode. And one of those, for instance, is I Fall to Pieces.
Yeah.
Where they sort of, it's so awkward the way they put him in the position of kind of cheerleader, and Kate says she needs to take back her power, and I think all of that stuff is wonderful, but they didn't know what to do with Angel. He feels kind of awkwardly out of place in that episode as the protagonist of the episode. And then ultimately they have him do a little action thing where he beats the guy with hits him in the face with a something something at the end of the episode. But I think what you're talking about leading in this episode with the swap of Gunn being in Angel's place, which kind of reads as here's our protagonist for this episode, and then the episode plays out that way. That's interesting.
Angel, I mean, he definitely starts off very white saviory, because once he realizes that I'll use your gang name, the Lost Boys. Once he realizes the Lost Boys have set booby traps for vampires and stuff like that, he's like, I've got to save these kids from the vampires. But then when he actually goes and talks to Gunn, and the way that Gunn characterizes it, he goes, I don't need advice from some middle class white dude who's dead.
Yeah.
The who's dead part, it obviously is him referring to Angel as a vampire, but that's within the context of middle class white dude.
Yeah.
So
Class is class and ethnicity are very specifically called out in that statement.
Initially, Angel is trying to solve the vampire problem, but Gunn and Alana throughout the episode are trying to keep everybody alive. They steal food and are also avoiding cops. They have a vampire problem inside of a poverty system. And Angel doesn't get that. Angel thinks it's just the vampire problem. It's like, again, it's showing up to build a house or a church and then leaving, thinking that you've helped the community.
I like it.
It's so he begins as a white savior. They're absolutely coded white supremacists. The first shot of the gang leader pulls back from his bald head.
Yeah, and he says this used to be a nice neighborhood.
He does. He says, street trash. We used to have decent working people living here, he says. And now they moved in.
Yeah.
They think they can take over.
Says the vampire.
Says the white vampire to the white vampire gang.
Yeah.
And even when when Lost Boys discover where the vampire nest is, the way that they describe it to me sounded like gentrification.
Yeah, I see that reading for sure.
So for me, the turn for Angel's character is when he's locked in the meat locker.
Okay.
When Gunn shoves him in the meat locker and says, "We'll see about that," basically, and then goes off and does his thing. Angel tries to punch his way through the wall, and then Wesley and Cordy show up and just open the door.
Oh yeah, use your cell phone. I see when we use the cell phones, which is a funny joke, but I see what you're saying.
It is, but also it's Angel not recognizing the system in which he's trapped, and only trying to solve the short-term immediate problem of busting through the wall. Cordy and West dismantle the system by just coming along and opening the door.
It makes a lot of sense.
So at the end of the climax, Angel doesn't actually save Gunn. Gunn gets his own character arc and resolution. He has to confront Alana and kill her. Angel has nothing to do with that. And then this is the part where he acts as an ally instead of as a white savior. He uses his power and privilege to dismantle the system that the white supremacist vampires have put in place when he says, "Name's Angelus, and this is my town." That's one of the few times post-Soul that he calls himself Angelus.
That's true. Yeah, it's a very significant moment, and I always struggled with how to read his use of that, other than, as you say, him using the system to dismantle it.
He's a 245-year-old vampire, well-known and well-storied vampires, and he's using his clout with the other vampires to say, "You want to fight me?"
Yeah, I like it.
And he doesn't actually lift anybody up. He dismantles the system.
Huh.
And then the episode ends with Angel and Gunn standing shoulder to shoulder, and Angel saying, "I need your help sometime." So it ends with them as equals.
Well, in one of the telling shots of the way the pilot opens, and ends rather, and I even used the same shot at the end of Guys Will Be Guys, is Angel standing and looking over his city. But the episode ends with Angel walking away and Gunn standing and looking over his city.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a repetition of the opening swap of Gunn being on the same level as him, which I like.
And then the other thing that I noted was that, and you called this out in first impressions, the Doyle's line, "Well, we only got something to atone for," and flashing over everybody's atonement who's on the show at that point. Angel, Wes, and Cordy's thing that they're atoning for involved a fall. Angel fell from his status and privilege back in the 1700s. Wesley fell from the Watchers Council. Cordelia fell from on top of the social heap. Guns does not involve a fall. Guns thing that he's trying to atone for is losing Alana.
Right.
But he doesn't actually lose status or anything like that.
Because there isn't status to be lost? Is that what you're...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because he's coming up. He's coming up.
Interesting. I like it.
But yeah, so whoever Gary Campbell was back in the year 2000, he was doing all right.
Yeah, I it's always interesting when you get the repeats and the writers that did 1 or 2 episodes and that was kind of it. You just wonder what happened. Or maybe we do because we're the ones having a conversation about it on a Saturday afternoon.
Gary Campbell's most recent credit is he created the Canadian TV crime drama Carter, which is about an actor who loses his status and becomes a detective.
Yeah, and he was a writer on The Kids in the Hall. One thing that was unfair, I mean, that episode guide was a struggle and I think a miss in a few ways, but one thing that was unfair was to call him out for his previous comedy writing credits when Mr. Whedon himself comes from Roseanne and the Buffy movie and Toy Story to these shows, so that was unfair of me. And Alien Resurrection. All right, well, is there anything else great stuff, Josh, great stuff. Was there something else you picked up on that one you want to throw out?
I think that the show sustains Gunn as Angel's equal for a while until it suddenly doesn't, and then it's jarring much later on. And I track it in season 4.
And when does he start dating Fred?
Late season 3.
I believe actually that's there's a reading on that in the essay that Sarah mentioned again, which I just want to throw out there is if you're interested in Gunn's arc and the direction and all of that, definitely go have a look.
Gunn sold his soul for his pickup truck 5 years before this episode, 1 year before Buffy was called as a Slayer, and 1 year before Fred fell into Pylea.
Huh.
Just trivia. That's all I got.
All right, good deal, bud. Boris, let me see if you freeze. No, your video's playing, so maybe it isn't just me.
Hey.
Hi.
All right. Just close that. And all right.
Warzone.
Warzone. Obviously we can't talk about it without talking about Mr. Gunn himself, the son of the gun. It's definitely interesting, like having him introduced here because we've just wrapped up the Faith story, and then Blind Date's gonna come in and like give us a good dose of Lindsay-ness, and the comments of kind of that Blind Date review kind of mentioned this, but like there's definitely a lot of interesting like parallels between like those 3 characters and I guess also Angel himself, but like for those 3 specifically, they regardless of like the gender or the race or whatever, they all kind of have come from a poor background and were very mistreated in their youth, and essentially and they all have approached have dealt with that in various different ways. Like obviously Lindsay was just being I'm just gonna be a dick and whatever, and then Faith was like she had her own thing, and then she was evil for a while and then kind of fell, and then kind of went back to the good side, I guess. And Mr. Gunn has generally been on the side of good, but he's kind of towing that line because he's kind of like being reckless and stuff. And Sarah already pointed out the whole connection with the Faith story and the Gunn backstory as the kids. They were like they had the bravery stuff, and they obviously were very reckless and with business, and because they didn't have as much to lose, and which kind of made them more viable for that kind of thing.
Well, they definitely explore that with Buffy says in Fool for Love that Slayers come with an expiration date on the package.
And it's like a little Death Wish thing.
Yeah, and so that sort of explains Faith's impulsivity, is kind of a knowledge of your chances of living are not that great. And for Gunn, I think that's coded as a part of poverty and the dangers of living on the street.
Well, the thing is, the Faith story was like before she was called to the Slayerhood, so like she definitely was not in a great place at all. Like there's all that implied
with her mother
stuff.
And yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. I guess as for the character of Charles himself, like I did not know he was going to be a regular in season 2 until like he showed up in the credits. I was like, oh, that's the thing. Because in general, I do like the character of Gunn. Like I think he's like he's a solid, like he has a good jive with everybody. Like you just like, it's just nice to have him hang out with everyone. Although like I guess, and yeah, I guess in terms of the main cast characters, like he might be like lower on the list. Like he's above Connor, I guess, and then like because like even with the characters, like some of the shorter range characters like Harmony and Doyle and Illyria, I guess, like I do like I do kind of like them a little more than Gunn, and I guess just because I feel like they had a little bit more, I don't know, character or like spunk or something, like but that's not to say that Gunn or Jay August are like bad at all. Like they're perfectly cool.
Well, I think what you're describing is what we were saying earlier, underwritten. Illyria has a lost kingdom. She's a god in a human world. I mean, there is so much drama and richness, and let alone the memories of Fred that she carries, and this man who calls her Smurf when he gets drunk, or whatever Wes's insult was. I mean, there's a ton of that stuff, and for Gunn, they tend to fail to develop those driving feeling, that drama. I mean, Alana, I actually find the scene with Alana very affecting, but then sort of after that, there's nothing until I can really think of until Fred. And then in season 5, there's the lawyering that costs Fred her life. And all of that, but he just fails to have that same sort of Wes has his father and his insecurity and his relationship to what his father may have done to him over the course of time. Cordy's kind of becomes everybody around her. Angel and the community and the visions, of course, are the main driving, a big driving source of drama for her. Fred kind of lacks the same thing too, and we've already said that Fred feels a little underwritten compared to Illyria, certainly.
Well, I'd say like I do prefer Fred to Gunn, and maybe it's just because Amy Acker was able to do a little more with the material. And also it's just like she had that whole like thing where she was like, she was more quirky because she was like in a like a green person land for like 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, and like there's a bit more like camaraderie, like, and also she had the whole like the smart person thing that helped as well. Like, I mean, Wesley kind of had that, but like this is kind of like a different vibe, which is nice.
Science versus understanding of demon lore and all of that, certainly.
Yeah, and also she kind of had that like upbeat energy that you kind of want to have, like, but in a different way from Corey, where like Corey is a bit more like snarky, whereas like Brenda seems kind of like more soft and genuine. Or not that Corey isn't genuine, but like it's a different kind of flavor.
Sure.
I don't know if I had too much else. I'm gonna just check my notes real quick. Yeah, because I didn't really have like too much to say on this episode.
That's gonna happen when we do them one at a time.
And also just like blind date, like there's gonna be a lot more to say on that. Like, I don't know.
Well, it's an arc episode for sure. Well, no worries, bud. If there is, if you're good, we can go on.
Let me just check 1 second. Oh yeah, I did kind of like how we have that someone said like there was like a whole world that no one ever sees, and then Angel's like more than one, so it's like he might be even aware of some of this to some extent, or maybe he doesn't. It's a little confusing. Oh, and also just the Angel cell phone bit is great. Like anytime he's being an old man is fun. Or petty. He's just like, I don't want to call people my cell phone. No.
Yeah, that's a little bit of his "you got peanut butter on the bed" I felt coming out when he says, "I decide when we use the cell phones." But yeah, I like it. It's very endearing.
Yeah, so let the stage roll to others.
All right, bud. Jack.
Hey.
Hi, everyone in the stream and here. This is Jack. Jack is not dead. Jack is alive.
No, I'm not dead.
He's and I have not decided to propose yet. But
and I'm okay too. I'm okay.
Yeah. So yes, if you watch the Guys Will Be Guys video and were confused by the dedication, yeah.
It was very kind and sweet, and I didn't know it was coming, and it made me feel lots of things, and oh boy, yeah, I love you.
Yeah,
I love you very much.
I love you too. I love Josh's. Can a guy dedicate a piece of work to another man in peace, please?
Exactly. But let them wonder, Ian. Let them wonder.
So Warzone.
Warzone, yeah. Let me look at my notes here. Let's talk about David Nabbit for
Mr.
a
Nabbit.
second.
Yeah. Where do you land on Nabbit?
I love him. He's so like adorable and kind of pathetic, but it's like an endearing kind of pathetic. I kind of wish he hung around for a while, even like a series regular, because like, can you imagine like Angel investigations with like an unlimited bankroll? Like some cool stuff could have happened there.
Yeah. Again, I feel like he was something that might have been intended for the episodic structure of the show.
Right.
I mean, they pitch all of these stories very early on, and everyone's working on things well in advance. And the structure of the episode might have been invented when they were shooting I Fall to Pieces or any of those ones early on. There are, I think Go Fish in Buffy Season 2 was originally proposed as a Season 1 episode.
Oh.
So, I mean...
Oh, it feels like one.
It does feel like one. And that's how that can go sometimes, is those just kind of sit around. So yeah, who knows if that was why they kind of went and did away with him or whatever. I think I've read Whedon say that the lesson he learned from Angel is to build the ensemble, and they ran way too lean for the first part of that season. Not enough characters.
Okay.
And so maybe there was some throwing things against the wall to see what stuck. You know,
that makes sense.
I just finished Guys Will Be Guys, and Virginia, see, that's in the name, Virginia, she,
subtle.
Yeah, very subtle, guys. By the way, someone pointed out, this is not specifically you, Jack, this is everyone, they loved the subversion of if Buffy was a virgin sacrifice in the white dress at the end of season 1, Virginia saving herself by having been sexually empowered and slept with whoever the hell she wanted to, which I thought was a fun take. There's some questionable stuff in the stories she relates, but the idea of her being sexually empowered and that being the thing that undermines her father, I thought was wonderful. Sorry, Jack, I stole your thunder there.
No, that's I see what you did there. Clever. The blackmail plot is kind of meh. It's just kind of, I don't know. I feel like it's
it goes nowhere. When you said blackmail, I got confused for a minute, and I'm not making a joke. I honestly was like, "Wait, what? What are you trying to say about?"
I wasn't either.
Yeah. You're talking about Nabbit is being blackmailed at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, and it's clearly just an excuse to have Angel meet up with Gunn's crew, and that's cool. But they could have done that any other way. I don't know. But from that, we did get that hilarious scene in the demon brothel where that lady's like, "Look, ma, no hands," and she tickles that Angel in the tail. I thought that was really funny. I like that.
She's an interesting demon for sure. Also, that actress looks familiar to me when I was watching this time. I can't I don't know if I've seen her someplace else, but she looks very familiar.
Okay. I also kind of feel like that place is like a Star Trek nerd's like wet dream, like literally. I guess. I'm sorry. It's just a thought I had watching it. I don't. Anyway, moving on.
We don't punish thoughts here, Jack.
We should. We really should.
Yeah. I don't know how to bail you out on that one, buddy. What's next on your list?
No, it's fine. I dug this hole. Gunn. Let's talk about Gunn. Gunn is, as others have said, J. August that guy,
J. August Richards. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, he's a wonderful actor, very charismatic. My notes here say charismatic AF, which is, yep, totally. I enjoy Gunn a lot more when he becomes more of a person and less of a stereotype, I guess.
Yeah.
In the beginning, like when we were talking earlier, I said how like this episode to me feels like a 80s or 90s sort of gangbanger kind of film, which is fine. I like those kinds of films, but yeah, it feels like The Warriors or Dangerous Minds or one of those kinds of films, and it's not a bad thing, and I enjoy those kinds of films, but it's just it feels odd in the Buffyverse. It feels like it's sort of it feels like it sort of, I don't know, out of place kind of. But again, they're in LA, so I mean.
Well, I mean the thing that I tried to do in the episode guide was to not completely indict that archetype as one to avoid. I think that there are stories to tell from any social strata or group. The problem was that media was flooded with one kind of representation at the time versus is kind of a broad spectrum of different kinds of stories to tell of non-white characters, and especially in Buffy. Gunn being one of the rare ones that didn't die in the one episode that he appeared in, a la Nikki or Buffy's counselor, or I mean, Mr. Trick was in a few episodes, but problems there as well. Again, it's one of these things about this show that I know everyone here loves and cherishes, that it's like, yep. Due diligence.
I guess it just feels like the whole element in this episode, it just feels kind of, it's done in a very cliche way, except like they're fighting vampires rather than engaging in like gang warfare or whatever. it's just done in the way that's been done many times before.
Yeah, they
So,
don't really subvert it. It's just kind of the backdrop to the dramatic story that's there. I love Josh's reading of how Angel is involved in this, but I don't think it really negates the fact that this trope, verging on cliche that they start with, they don't really innovate or do anything new with it. It just is a backdrop for a character story about he and his sister, which could have been anything. Like it could have started from any place.
Yeah, and that's why it feels a bit weird to me, because like you would think, like, because the Buffyverse deals with lots of themes that have been done before, but they typically do something different with it. And
I mean the whole premise is the whole premise of Buffy was to subvert a trope. So when they have it, they use a trope that we're all very, very familiar with, and don't do that. It feels kind of well, then why?
Yeah. That's more or less what I was trying to say. It feels weird because it's just, like I said, I feel like I'm watching a gangbanger film or something. You know, it's
and one of the times they don't do that springs to mind is Beauty and the Beasts. The abuse story that occurs in that episode through a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde idea. Everything plays out in a relatively straightforward, expected, cliche kind of way. But I think in that situation, Debbie and whatever his name was are intended to be reflecting or a prism on Angel and Buffy. And so Debbie and Pete, thank you, are a way of exploring our two characters. So in that case, to not change the trope around or to not subvert it is because it's serving a purpose for exploring Buffy having been a victim of abuse, deciding whether or not monster that wants to be redeemed. Giles's whole speech in the library about Angel, whether she should let him back into her life. So I think not breaking it up there serves a purpose for the story, but again with Gunn, most of the time for me does not.
And the stuff they did with his sister's pretty good. It kind of, especially that last scene is wonderful where Gunn has to kill her. It's really well done, but I just kind of feel like it would have hit a lot harder if we had like an episode or two of setting up their relationship and sort of exploring it a bit. But I guess maybe they didn't have time or whatever. I just feel like it's done well, and they did what they were trying to do, but it just would have been better if there was more weight behind it, I guess.
Yeah, Wonder says the pain on Gunn's face was done so well. Yeah, their performances in that scene are great. It's very intimate. I have a problem with the prosthetics. I'm like, really? This line is so important, and you've solved this problem, everyone. But other than that, or ADR her line or something, please.
It took me out of it as well a bit.
Because it's so emotional and successful until the prosthetic.
The scene towards the end where they're about to have a showdown and Angel steps in, and I agree with Josh's take that the vampires are an allegory or a code or coded white supremacists or neo-Nazis and all that, because that's literally the first thing I thought when you see the close up at the guy with the bald head, and that it's very specific. That shot, it's very specific. So and just on like a surface level, I loved when Angel stakes him and he says names and jealous. On a surface level, I just love any moment where Angel uses that notoriety to sort of intimidate or scare people. I think that's just great. Love it. I think that's all I got.
All right, good deal, bud. Mr. Russell, sir.
Hey, Ian.
Hey, bud. How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
I am excellent, wonderful, super.
That's good. Let's see. Warzone.
Yep, bit of a. Actually, it hasn't been that contentious. It's. I thought we'd, sort of be all over the map on this one, but everyone seems to sort of feel, yeah, lots of good stuff like this. Wish it did this better, the kind of thing. But where do you fall on this one?
Well, I kind of agree with a lot of people's opinions. David Nabbit, too bad they didn't do too much, like Jack said, with his character. But then again, what could you do with his character? I do like the part where he's supposed to be this overly rich guy, but he doesn't have a lot of friends.
Yeah, the social isolation is a very interesting. I think Wonder was the one that pointed that out that I hadn't really thought about. Another way in which they're inverted. He's incredibly isolated versus Gunn having a sense of community and connection. I like that.
So did I. Let's see. Again, I liked what Jack and Josh had said about Angel saying, "I'm Angelus." Kind of reminds me of season 5, Why We Fight, when he in the flashback scene when he stakes that one vampire. I think he has a similar line before he just. It's been a while since I've seen that season. I like Charles Gunn. I was glad they kept him.
Yeah.
Usually when they introduce a good character, they either kill him off or the end and you don't hear from them. He brought a different, he brought a different direction to the show, which I really liked. Up till this was just feeling like Buffy spinoff. And introducing Gunn from this point on, and especially when you get to Fred, it feels like Angel does develop on its own from that point. So I really like the fact that they kept him. He is one of my favorite characters. Yes, Lauren too, but I got a few things to say on Lauren when we get there. Let's see. I don't think I have too much for you that you guys didn't already cover. So
no worries, bud. I know it's tough to. Sarah C is here. We'll go over to Sarah C in a minute, but I know it's tough to be towards the end of the discussion than at the beginning, which is why I do try and rotate. I do try and pay attention.
But I will have more for you on Blind Date.
All right, we're doing Blind Date in 2 weeks. Sarah C, I know you said you were just here to hang out, but if you want to hop in.
Hello. Was doing so. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm at the end, so everybody already said everything, and everyone's tired, and no one wants to hear more people talk. But
I want to hear you talk.
But the only thing I did want to bring up, I mean, I like Gunn. I really like Gunn, and I think he's woefully underused and misused, and it's very sad. It's very sad. And you're like, oh, all the writers were white. Right. Connected. And two, if y'all probably have heard of the term lampshading.
I have not. What is lampshading?
Oh, cool. Someone made also a very good video on the lampshading in the Big Bang Theory. But it's the idea of when I'll find the actual definition, but it's you point something out like, oh, that's so sexist to say, but then you keep doing it, and as a sort of out to, for example, when they point out racism in Angel, and then it's still kind of there as a way to. Let me find the definition so I can explain it better. But that's the idea, that just by pointing it out, by lampshading it, by pointing out, oh, the treatment of this character is racist, it doesn't actually take away the fact that the writing is or could be racist. Let me find the actual definition. But that word comes to mind when I think of Gunn in
I'm reminded of the extremely awkward. I mean, and I'm saying this in quotes. White people humor whenever Gunn is in the room. He's got a fly street tag, yada yada. No, that's my name, Gunn. And that's a joke they go back to a couple of times. Of we're so awkward, and the joke itself seems to me like an acknowledgement that you're describing.
Yes.
Like, oh, it's humor, and yet it still exists, and yet it still indicates separate and other and different, as opposed to bringing everyone in the group together.
Yeah. There's a wonderful video. I might link it, but there's a wonderful video by Pop Culture Detective on the Big Bang Theory that talks about it pretty in terms of like the misogyny in Big Bang Theory.
I remember the one he did on that, yeah.
The writer's trick of dealing with any element of the story that threatens the audience's willing suspension of disbelief, whether a very implausible plot element or particularly blatant use of a trope, by calling attention to it and simply moving on.
Oh, I like that.
I mean, you see it all the time. It's even like saying, like, this isn't like the movies, or, wow, you're going to confess your love to me as I'm dying. How cliche. You know, it's like, you know, when done, people do it all the time, but when it's done with like, oh, that's really sexist or that's really racist, it's like, that doesn't resolve the problem. So that's the only thing that I wanted to like throw in the ring, is that you see, I mean, that's the thing, is they're not totally unaware. That's the thing, is it's not totally tone deaf. Like they're like, oh, look, the rest of the cast is white and don't know how to talk to this black man, and because we don't know how to talk to this black man, but it never actually, I don't obviously forms into anything.
Yeah, it strikes me as using metatextual humor as a way of not fixing the problems of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Look at how meta we are, and then, but if you take away that acknowledgement, it's the same old crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I like Gunn. I wish he got more better stuff. You know, that's all. I haven't watched the episode lately. I was skimming through it as we were chatting, and it's one of those that I think, unfortunately, for season 1, that sort of blends in a big.
It does a bit
noir shaped blob for me. Like it's just it's all right, you know.
Yeah, it's a common experience for me to watch an episode and get a lot more out of it when I'm writing an essay for it. But sometimes very rarely that works in reverse, where I like the essay or I like the episode less when I have to write about it, versus just kind of sitting and watching it for entertainment value. And I think I enjoy Warzone more just as an entertaining episode than I do once we start deconstructing it and getting into the nuts and bolts of it. But I love Josh's take on ally versus savior.
I meant to say, Josh, points. I mean, I already told you points. Man, that was cool.
Well, Sarah, I'm glad you talked.
Yeah, man, I know. It really just changed the whole game, man. I wasn't expecting to make it because I was working late, but it was nice to pop in.
All right, good deal. Well, we're doing Blind Date next week. Or not next week, in 2 weeks. I'm working on Fool for Love. The Guys Will Be Guys video went up on Monday. I thought it turned out pretty well, although I gave it the Something Blue treatment, where it was like, oh, it's a funny, light comedy. Oh, not anymore. But I still hope you guys enjoyed the video and some of the connections and stuff like that. I'm going to take tomorrow and Monday off because I have not been taking the 2 days off a week that I'm supposed to take off. So I'm actually going to take 2 days off. And then Tuesday we'll be back with the podcast. And we're making a big surprising... I don't know if it's that surprising, but we're making a big change to the podcast that'll appear on Tuesday. And we'll pick up the fanfic reading, find out what's happening with Spike and his new soul in Time Travelville. And, yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and I didn't acknowledge a donation. Beach Girl, thank you. The buttons aren't working because I broke everything today. But cheers, and I appreciate it. Yeah, this is a dance of capitalism. I can't think. Let's just go ahead and call it. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. 90 minutes on one episode today, so we're definitely doing one at a time going forward. Cheers, everyone. Have a good one.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, friends.
Bye.